Can you believe that Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth is out in just a few weeks? I am so happy about this information. Genuinely though, I can't believe it's been over a year since it was first announced. We've been shown a ton about this game through its hefty 10-minute story trailer and a few other pieces, as well as a fairly big demo included with the release of Gaiden. I really love the Yakuza games, or I guess the Like a Dragon games if you want to be politically correct. So what am I to do about this passion and hype that I have no one to talk to about other than make a 15-minute monologue? Yes, we've been shown a lot of what is in the game, but there is still so much we don't know about it. Like, we don't even know why it's called Infinite Wealth. This video has spoilers for most of these games, but in particular 2, 3, 6, 7 and Gaiden. Also spoilers for all the official Infinite Wealth pre-release material. I don't blame you if you're trying to avoid it with how bad these trailers can be for spoilers. With all that said, let's make this a proper YouTube video. Here are my top 8 predictions for Like a Dragon 8! Number 8. Dwight's gonna die a horrible death. Ever since Yakuza 4, or technically the first Samurai spin-off, a number of characters in each game have the likeness of their voice actors. They're often Japanese celebrities, so I have no clue who most of them are. The most recognisable outside of Japan is probably Takeshi Kitano in Yakuza 6. Even beyond actors, there's some truly bizarre crossovers. For example, Paul Lim, the Singaporean darts player, shows up as a side character in 6. You know those clips of those Japanese weather women that inexplicably have millions of views? They're gonna be in Infinite Wealth. You know these monsters that were in the Dondoko Island trailer? They're real? We're straying a bit away from the point there. Getting in these famous actors is a marketing thing, but I think it's kinda cool at the same time. Things have started to change recently with Gaiden. Nishitani III is not voiced by a Japanese actor, but instead a South Korean actor, Kim Jae-wook. But that's not all. Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth has the first English likeness character, with Dwight being played by Danny Trejo. I think it's really cool that they're doing this, but the reason I wanted to bring it up was because of a funny clause that Danny Trejo has in contracts for roles where he plays the villain. According to Danny Trejo's contract, any villain character he plays must die before the end because crime doesn't pay. Ergo, Dwight is going to die. They may very well do a switcheroo of revealing that he's not actually a bad guy, but I'm pretty confident he is a villain because above all, he is an American, meaning he speaks English. Number 7. They're still hiding another party member. To be honest, I get less and less convinced about this as the days go on, but there is one thing that's been bothering me and made me initially think this. Over the last few months, Sega have done these live streams for the Western audience where they've gone over info on the new games and had a little bit of gameplay, and it's whatever. Interestingly though, the stream they did on the series' 18th anniversary used a save from what appears to be the end of the game. There's not too much to say about it, they only really do stuff you can already do in the demo, but after every fight, they would switch the stream to the camera and bring the game back after exiting the results screen. Seems very suspicious. Maybe they just want to hide which of the returning party members is on Ichiban's squad, but I kind of doubt that since you can easily work out who's in which party from the trailers and just looking at the box art. This, to me, can only mean that there's another party member that they haven't talked about at all, right? Though that would be kind of impressive given how much they have shown through trailers and stuff, but what other explanation is there for hiding the results screen of all things? As for who this secret party member could be, let's say it's Yamai. Maybe that's a little bit weird since everything we've seen about him so far is that he is very obviously a villain who will be irredeemable, which means he is absolutely going to be redeemed because that's how it goes in every single one of these games. But also, Yokoyama, the head of RGG Studios, has said in interviews that he believes Yamai will become even more popular than Majima. Firstly, terrible prediction. Brother, you're talking about Goro Majima, he's one of the icons of the series. And secondly, what better way to get people invested in a character than making them a party member? The official site even explicitly states that he forms a bond with Kasuga. It's not unheard of to make villains party members in this series either. Jungi-Han and Zhao come across as villains when you initially meet them in the last game, yet they join the party and become best bros with the Ichi gang. Though, speaking of Zhao, number 6! He's not gonna join the party until late in the game again, and make me very upset. In Yakuza 7, we spend a fair amount of the game with just Adachi, Namba and Saiko, which is great, it's the squad, you know? Then later Jungi-Han joins and is by far the most overpowered character in the game. And you can go get the optional party member Eri, who is also very strong. So there's already a lot to juggle between wanting to keep the main gang together or to sweep the entire game with head trauma. When I got to chapter 11, which is near the end of the game, and Zhao joined the group, there was no space to put him in the party and I ended up not using him. Everyone else already covered pretty much everything and I didn't want to spend more time getting Zhao's weapon and gear upgraded when it was completely unnecessary at that point. He's a great character and I did want to see more of him, but I just couldn't make it work. I did end up using him in my second playthrough and he is good, he's not overpowered like K-pop boy over there, but you know. I was really hoping that Infinite Wealth would force me to use Zhao and for a longer period of time than his introduction, but looking at the trailers I don't think that's the case. It appears that he'll be in Kiryu's party in Japan, which I'm excited about, but he's not always in shots with the rest of that party. And in the character spotlight trailer they have for Zhao, a lot of it is in those in-game cutscenes that aren't fully animated, whereas the other spotlight trailers mostly are the big cinematic cutscenes. I'm probably just reading too much into this, but if there's not many cutscenes then he's not in the game very much, which makes me sad. Number 5. Mine is still dead, but Yakuza 7 did many controversial things amidst the switch to turn-based combat, including the revival of 3 dead characters. I like the way they brought back Jungi Han because I think it adds more depth to both of these people, and it would have been a waste to lose this character after only one game. As for the other two, I'm not so convinced. Of all the characters they could have brought back, they bring back 2 characters who have arguably the most blatant deaths in the series, with no logical way to weasel out of it. Lau Kalong is shot between the eyes, yet here he is, seemingly fine. Kashiwagi gets shredded by a helicopter, so I guess it must be a coincidence that this bartender guy looks and sounds the same as him. These revivals don't bother me that much because they're ultimately minor characters in 7. I would prefer it if they didn't happen, but they don't exactly keep me awake at night. What keeps me awake at night is the truly bizarre decision to bring back Andre Richardson as a new bartender over in Hawaii. This one feels more like a joke resurrection than the others, with even the English dub leaning into the memes.
If you ever need a roof over your head or a place to speak in private...
It frustrates me though because they bring back this goofy American stereotype, yet insist that Mine, the significantly more interesting character who dies at the same time as Richardson, is actually dead. And it's not like they may be hiding that he's still alive, unless they retcon it, which they very well could. The man's a splat on the floor. It's just what he gets for speaking English, I suppose.
There's no change in the plan.
Something I find really funny is that Sega have recently done a real-life funeral remembrance thing for characters in the Yakuza series that have died. It's so silly and I love it. Mine is very prominently shown to be dead, but not Richardson. All these revivals, specifically from Yakuza 3, are stupid and I don't like them, because I think they undermine a lot of that game's emotional impact. But I also dislike the fact that Ryuji from Yakuza 2, who has possibly the vaguest death in the series, never shows up again. I honestly don't see why he would have died when Kiryu, who suffered the same injuries as him, went on with his life. They happily brought back these explicitly dead characters, yet rarely mention someone as popular as Ryuji. Curiously though, he isn't part of that real-life funeral. After Like a Dragon Gaiden, I think Ryuji's comeback is quite clearly telegraphed. He's hyped up so much in that game as a legend on par with Kiryu. He has multiple impersonators and the main story goes out of the way for Kiryu to say something about this character who he hasn't talked about in well over a decade. Even if it's not in Infinite Wealth, I think there's a very high likelihood that Ryuji Goda will be back soon. Number 4. I'm going to spend a lot more time in this game than I think I am. From day 0, the first thing they said about Infinite Wealth was that it is going to be the biggest game in the series. For over a decade, Yakuza 5 has been the undisputed biggest Yakuza game with 5 characters, 5 cities, a million minigames and huge side stories. It's not all the highest quality, and some side stories are more fleshed out than others, but the quantity of it is certainly impressive. It's been said in interviews that Infinite Wealth's main story with minimal side content will take 3 to 4 days. When I read that, my first instinct was to think, oh, that's silly Yokoyama saying silly little things in silly interviews, as he always does. But at the same time, for Gaiden he said it was only a bit longer than the Kaito files. Lost Judgment's DLC that's like 7 or 8 hours. I ended up spending 20 to get to Gaiden's credits and then another dozen on the remaining side content. Applying the same logic to Infinite Wealth. Oh no! It feels like they're constantly revealing more stuff for the game, like they completely hid Dondoku Island for months even though it's an enormous Animal Crossing style mode that could have probably been its own game. Kiryu's bucket list was randomly revealed the morning after the Game Awards, and it's his main piece of side content with a ton of returning characters and callbacks to the old games. Sujimon battles were shown in the gameplay trailer, but they didn't show the extent of how they literally just built an entire Pokemon system inside an already massive RPG. I am sure the 3 to 4 days thing for just the main story is an exaggeration to a point, but there's no doubt that this game is going to be stupid big. Though it's not quite as big as 5, Yakuza 7 takes a very long time to get going, but once it does, I don't want it to stop despite having the longest main story in the series, or at least I feel that way until chapter 14. That penultimate chapter starts to make the game drag a bit, and the length of the story results in some bad stuff cropping up like Mirror Face. I think you could totally cut out parts of 7's endgame and make it a much smoother time. I just hope they're able to take that experience of making a long story so Infinite Wealth's size doesn't become a drawback. Number 3. Ebina will be Kiryu's final boss. Assuming that Ichiban and Kiryu don't join back into the same party, instead have their own final bosses, I think the trailers are pretty blatant in showing at least one of the final bosses. I don't think they're fooling anyone with the unassuming character who just so happens to be voiced by Daniel Day Kim in the English dub. They're not going to hire someone of his caliber for a random character. They even hinted his tattoo in the character spotlight video, though it's hard to make out what it is. He seems to be besties with Sawashiro in the story trailer, but as a random thought, maybe he betrays and kills him here. I kind of hope not, but there's still a lot of mystery surrounding Ebina, so making any judgment on him is purely speculation. He's the one that reveals to the world that Kazuma Kiryu is still alive, which has been a core aspect of his character for these last few games. Revealing that alone would make him a major threat, so it's not hard to see why he could be Kiryu's ultimate antagonist. He's already dealt with kind of a personification of the Yakuza world in Gaiden, so having someone to represent the other side of the scale as a conniving prick feels right. Maybe we'll fight him more than once though. In the character spotlight video they seem to splice together shots of 2 different fights with Ebina, one where he has a sword and one at presumably the top of the Millennium Tower. From the big story trailer I assume that the Millennium Tower is going to be Kiryu's final section because that's why he's rocking the old grey suit, but you'd think that using a sword would be a final resort after already losing, but that shot is in a different place than the Millennium Tower one. I mean, it could also just be that he pulls the sword out halfway through the fight when he's on the side of the room without a window, I don't know. Number 2. Wheelchair Man is Ichiban's final boss. Look, I know, it's horrible to accuse the disabled man of being a bad guy, but I'm not the one who wrote about his dreams of standing up to justice. The roots of Ichiban's caring character stem back to him taking care of Masato, the person he still considers his brother despite the terrible man he turns into. The parallel between Masato and Miimura is made painfully obvious in the story trailer. All we've seen of this character so far is him returning the favour to Ichiban by helping him out in a few situations, as he overall just seems like a nice man. I'm just hung up on this one blink and you miss it shot from the story trailer where you see him smoking with a completely different outfit. Seems antithetical to the caring man we see everywhere else. Miimura is even more elusive than Ebina, and there's not really any concrete evidence that points to him being a villain, let alone a final boss, but it just feels likely, you know? There must be something deeper, or they wouldn't point out that he remains composed in critical situations, or just portray him like this in all of the trailers. There is one damning piece of evidence, however, for why Eiji Mitamura is a villain. He speaks English.
That man is not safe. Who you should be arresting is the driver.
Well, he's trying his best at least. I can't really blame him, to be honest. Number 1. Infinite Wealth really will be an uplifting game. So, after the emotional roller coaster that is Like a Dragon Gaiden's ending and the premise of 8 possibly being Kiryu's last game, it almost feels like they've been preparing us for what's to come. At the same time though, it's been a bit bizarre reading some interviews because RGG keep mentioning that Infinite Wealth isn't going to be a sad game or anything, which seems so far off the trailers that have been pulling at the heartstrings because, by the way, this character you've played as for more than 8 games now has cancer. Getting shot or stabbed, that can be dealt with, but man. Despite that, I'm inclined to believe what they've said about Infinite Wealth's tone. Kiryu has always been a tragic character. He's haunted by his past and is constantly ripped away from the quiet life that he so desperately desires. He's always been imprisoned by guilt and performs these selfless acts that leave him isolated from the people he loves, all for the sake of protecting them. However, those selfless acts ultimately end up poorly thought out because he doesn't believe just how much other people need him, and more importantly, how much he needs them. He spends almost the entire series running away because he doesn't see how it affects his friends and his children until he gets out of prison at the start of Yakuza 6, only to find out his own daughter is following in his footsteps by running away. From that moment on, he spends that whole game trying to stop people from repeating the same mistake he has made so many times, and on the way, he makes a ton of new friends. Whether it be the Hirose boys, the Jimas, his own children, or countless others, Kiryu thrives with other people. What better way to explore that than the mechanics of a turn-based RPG? He perceives the Yakuza in the earlier parts of this series with this idealistic view of it being full of men who will stop at nothing to assert their values and morals like he does, but that couldn't be further from the truth. For a long time now, the Yakuza itself in these games has been portrayed as an extremely archaic system that's unable to adapt to the modern world, leading to the fantasy values members supposedly uphold rotting away as criminals with hearts of gold are replaced entirely with despicable people who lack any humanity. Just because there are good people in the Yakuza, it doesn't make it beneficial to society. In Gaiden, the Daidoji faction's rigid hierarchy isn't that different from that of the Yakuza. As Kiryu's left secluded from the rest of civilization, he becomes completely disenchanted from that way of life, leading to him helping with the dismantling of the Tojo and the Omi for the betterment of both the public and those still in the Yakuza, even if they don't accept it yet. Kiryu's life may have been a tragedy, but that hasn't stopped the creation of so many positive memories that have been cast aside in the past in favour of the bad ones until now. The first thing we see Kiryu do in Hawaii is leave behind Yumi's ring that he's held onto for nearly 30 years. It really feels like a sign that it's time to reconcile with the past to pave way for a brighter future, all while grappling with his own mortality, which I'm sure will be talked about more in depth after the game comes out, but right now this video is getting a little bit longer than I wanted it to be. Honestly, it's so commendable that I'd be able to go on for hours about a character who looks like this most of the time. The Yakuza series is known for its silliness, and not necessarily its serious plot, but I think entirely focusing on one or the other is missing the bigger picture. While reality might not always have the highs of the unstoppable power of friendship and loyalty, or the crushing lows of the physical and mental anguish these characters go through, the Yakuza series still holds the essence of life. It's sincere. That's why I love it so much. I don't think that cancer will kill Kiryu. Majima and Saejima go through hell, yet they're able to find their place in the world together. Ichiban lost half of his life in prison, but is always able to rise from rock bottom. It's not that Kiryu's earned a happy ending or anything like that, I just don't think misery is what this series is about. On a more meta level, Ryosuke Hori, the director of 7 Gaiden and Infinite Wealth, was diagnosed with cancer during the development of Yakuza 6, and he beat it. I can only imagine that someone who's been through that experience would want to make a hopeful story rather than something depressing. While it may very well be the last time we play as him, I very much doubt it's the last we'll ever see Kiryu again. RGG have been incredibly reluctant to get rid of Kiryu for numerous games, perhaps from the fear of not knowing if the franchise can survive without him. But now, with Ichiban leading the franchise as one of the most likeable characters ever, and Yagami handling the judgment side of things, RGG have proven that they have boundless creativity even if it doesn't involve Kazuma Kiryu. In different ways, every one of these games gets a little bit better than the last, and for that, I couldn't be more excited about Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth.